On NBA Today, JJ, Big Perkin, Matt Barnes, they've all played in the finals, each of them on why experience matters here. Plus, this Celtics team has matched up surprisingly well with the Warriors. Our crew on how the C's have slowed the Splash Bros. And speaking of the Dubs, it's their 6th finals in 8 years, so our panel on the most impressive part of their dynastic run. NBA Today starts right now. Welcome to NBA Today, presented by PNC Bank. I'm Malika Andrews, and the finals, they're only 2 days away. We have a panel full of experts and so much to get to regarding the finals. But I want to start by going straight to JJ Redick. As you know, the Celtics, the Warriors, they're the top 2 defensive teams in the NBA. At least they were in the regular season. You made a career, though, out of making the lives of defenders incredibly difficult. So in a series that's filled with offensive powerhouses, you'd think it would be Steph or Clay or Jason Tatum. But what player do you think will be the key to unlocking their team's offense here?
Look, I really liked what I saw from Robert Williams II at times during that Eastern Conference Finals. I thought he was phenomenal in Game 4 specifically. And what he provides is a vertical lob threat. He provides offensive rebound, of course, the interior defense. But when I look at who the Warriors have played so far in the playoffs, they haven't played a player that is that vertical lob threat and that offensive rebounder that the Celtics have in Robert Williams II. And, of course, look, we're showing a lot of defensive highlights here. That was the one issue that we saw over and over again in that Mavs series. They did not have interior defense. They had no rim protection, and that's what he provides for the Celtics.
A healthy Robert Williams. Interesting. JJ, thank you so much. Please do not go too far, because if we're talking about big men in this series, that means we need to bring in our resident big man, and that is Big Perk to break down the battle on the down low. Kendrick, which of these 2 teams do you think has the front court edge, my friend?
You know what? I got to go with the Boston Celtics. And here's why. When I look at Robert Williams and I look at Al Horford, that tandem is one of the best defensive tandems that I've seen in a long time for its bigs. It reminds me of a 2008 tandem when they had Kendrick Perkins and Kevin Garnett. Nobody wanted to see that. They're tied together like shoelaces. You're watching those guys when they're able to rotate offensively. Look, Robert Williams being a lob threat at the basket, like JJ said, opens up driving lanes for Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, and Marcus Smart, because you have to honor that he is a lob threat, so the guy that's guarding him is hesitant to go and block his shot. And then you have Al Horford, who can mix it up. He either roll into the basket or he could pick and pop and knock down that three-point shot. So when I look at this series, I'm giving the edge to the Boston Celtics as far as the front court.
You know, I think I might agree with you, Big Perk, but don't count out Kevon Looney. So from the big men matchup, that'll be a pivotal one. But there's a reason that the adage defense win championships. It exists, Matt Barnes. Your defensive prowess, you were known for it. We have 2 games with some of the best defenders in the finals between Marcus Smart and Draymond Green. Who do you think is the best defender in this series? I know it's tough.
You guys put me on the spot here, and it's hard to go against the defensive player of the year in Marcus Smart, but I'm choosing Draymond Green. The simple fact of his experience and his versatility. He's someone who can switch and guard 1 through 5. For guys that have contested at least 200 shots in the playoffs, he's holding his opponents to the lowest field goal percentage, which is 28%. So he does it on both ends, also 4th in blocks. So I just really love playoff Draymond, and particularly championship Draymond, because you know he's going to come out with his best.
Absolutely. And that team seems to go as Draymond Green goes in a lot of ways. All right, before we look ahead even further, I do want to look back at the 2 matchups this season between the Celtics and the Warriors. So here's what went down. Remember, it was the first matchup in it was in Boston, December 17th. Steph Curry, fresh off becoming the NBA's all-time three-point leader, he got it going early, Matt.
Yeah, I mean, this is Steph. What interests me in this, Malika, and obviously we're going to get to that, is both teams won on the opponent's floor.
Yeah.
Which is going to be huge to me in the finals. Who's going to be able to do that in the finals?
Well, particularly because in the last series of the Eastern Conference Finals, what we saw was home advantage won the day for a lot of it up until the very end when we're looking at those last 2 games. But here you can see Steph Curry patented behind the back.
Too much.
Putting some icing on the cake. Golden State would go on to walk away with this one. But, you know, revenge is best served cold. So let's go ahead to the second time that we saw these 2 teams in the season. It was March 16th. Remember, Boston struggled early. This is March. No longer struggling in this one. Watch here, though. Steph Curry gets tangled up with Marcus Smart on the floor. comes up hobbling a little bit. This is when Steph missed some significant time after injuring his ankle.
This is just a great hustle play, and unfortunately, Steve Kerr saw it a different way, taking up for his players. But, Marcus Smart is the ultimate hustler, defensive player of the year, and all he was doing was going after the ball, and that kind of stuff happens sometimes. It's just unfortunate it happened to Steph.
Absolutely. So Steve Kerr, Marcus Smart still going back and forth. Remember, Steph would not return to the game. He ended up missing the remainder of the regular season, and this is when Boston really created some separation. Jason Tatum doing what he does, getting it all the way to the hoop and one. Let's listen into both teams talking about each other ahead of game one.
You're asking me who I want to play. I'm going to tell you who I think we're going to play. We're going to play Boston. Okay. That's who we're going to play. Thank you.
Man, what a time to be alive. You and yours versus me and mine.
Boston is a hell of a team.
Oh, they're hungry and they play hard, so it'll be a challenge.
We know what's in front of us. We know what we're here to play for, and I don't think any of our guys are awed or intimidated by the moment at all. We understand what it is. We know the opponent in front of us.
There's just something about playing in Boston that feels special. We only play there once a year in the regular season, but it always feels like a special game, so it's exciting to be playing them.
There's always been battles. They've had some success, but I'm excited about a playoff series where there's in-game and in-series adjustments happen, and that should be fun.
So the Celtics are 9-7 against the Warriors since Steve Kerr took over in 2014. But this surprised me, Matt. Boston is the only team in the NBA with a winning record against Golden State in that span. The only one. Despite the fact that the rosters for both teams have changed, they've evolved over the years. The Celtics, they've been able to just consistently give the Warriors problems. And we're looking at the big three, right? Dre, Clay, Steph, Steve Kerr, Marcus Smart, and Brad Stevens, I guess, is the constants there for most of that time. But why do you think the Celtics have consistently matched up so well against Golden State here?
They play defense, and they have defensive versatility, and particularly Marcus Smart against Steph Curry. He's given Steph Curry a lot of problems because his strength, his lateral movement, his feistiness, he's quick with his hands. And he's also, among guys who've guarded Steph, he's given Steph the fourth hardest defense against him. Steph is only shooting 29% against Marcus Smart in his career, which is the fourth worst for anyone who's guarded Steph. So Marcus Smart is just a constant, doesn't give up, doesn't play. He takes charges. He does everything you want to see in a defensive player, and I think obviously that's why he's hurt.
He's
the Warriors and Steph.
Yeah, absolutely. He's a nuisance. He's a dog. He doesn't give up. It's all the things you love to see. Numbers you mentioned, you can see them right there. You said it. He's been one of the best in the league at making life tough for Steph. But JJ, it's not just about Smart, right? What do the Celtics do schematically that gives Golden State a hard time?
Yeah, this is a defense that's built, truthfully, a lot like those Houston Rockets teams that gave the Warriors some trouble in the Western Conference playoffs back in 2018 era. They switch, and they, in the regular season, were the team that switched the most frequently, and in the playoffs, they're the second most frequently switched defense in the league. And so a lot of the Warriors' action, ball movement, high splits, post splits, you have to switch those. Matt knows we played against these teams when we were with the Clippers together. And if you look back at the Mavs series, they elected not to switch those split actions guard to guard. Klay Thompson came off for threes. He had 3 of them on that action alone in Game 5. And they got to the basket on curls because they weren't switching. So the Celtics naturally have a switching defense. They also have physical defenders. You have to be physical. There's no point switching. You have to be physical and switch at the point of the screen.
Kendrick, you watched a whole lot of Boston basketball. Go ahead. Yep.
No, both of them brought up great points. When you think about Marcus Smart, I want to add to that point with Matt. He's the instigator and not the retaliator when he's going against Steph Curry. So we saw in them clips where he actually was forcing him to go where he wanted him to go. I said this earlier today. I'm saying that now we haven't witnessed a guy that frustrate Marcus Smart the way frustrate Steph Curry the way that Marcus Smart does.
Yeah.
Steph Curry gets offensive fouls because he's pushing off, things to that nature. And then I want to dive into JJ's point with the switching. The clips that we were watching with the switching just now, they were switching with a high IQ, meaning they were switching point of contact, but the guy who was getting screened, he was going under to switch under so that it wasn't getting slips to the basket. See, that's the thing that separates the Boston Celtics from everybody else that the Warriors has played and why they're the best defensive team in the league. Not only do they have the versatility, the length, and the athleticism, but they have the high IQ as basketball players. They have 5 or 6 guys, right? You think about Marcus Smart, Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Al Horford, Robert Williams, and Grant Williams. Those particular are great defensive players. And when you have a roster stacked up that high for us defensive players, any team better watch the hell out.
And I just want to add to that. I think that the point is, with the switching, normally you switch and you'll find a weak link. But like Perk said and like Jay, there's no real weak links on that defensive side. They try to attack Pritchard a little bit throughout the Eastern Conference playoffs. But for the most part, from 1, 2, and 3, from Smart, Brown, and Tatum, to me, that's the best, backcourt as far as guards being able to guard their own position that we have in the league.
Well, and we said it in the regular season, they were 2 of the top in terms of defense. Let's see if it can come to fruition in the playoffs. Don't worry, Perk, we're coming back to this. Still to come on NBA Today. Our panel, they've been there. They've done that. So some firsthand accounts of how finals experience matters. And is Klay Thompson the X factor in these finals? Fellow three-point marksman J.J. Redick on how Klay could be a series breaker. Plus, did you know that May 31st, it just so happens to be the anniversary of 2 wild performances by LeBron James. So a look back that you do not want to miss. Stick around. NBA Today will be back in a few. Remember, he spent over 900 days away from the NBA game, rehabbing 2 major injuries. And his return has the Dubs knocking on the championship door yet again. So here's Steph Curry on his fellow Splash Brothers' long journey back to the court.
What would you do if the thing you love the most was taken away for 2.5 years? How would you respond if the game disappeared?
Falls down, and Thompson grabs his left knee, now writhing in pain. And everybody for the Warriors and the franchise and here in the stands holding their breath.
How hard would you work to get back on the floor? All the hours, all the sweat, all the isolation, all the doubters. What would you do? Klay Thompson spent a whole year rehabbing his ACL injury. He was ready to come back and dominate. We knew it. But then on the day we were supposed to celebrate our future, it felt like deja vu all over again.
Klay Thompson has suffered.
Goosebumps watching that. All right, well, Klay Thompson averaging 19.8 points per game, shooting nearly 40% from 3. That's just this postseason. He's been a key contributor in the playoff run for the Warriors. But JJ, Golden State, what version of Klay Thompson, what do they need him to be in this series to beat Boston?
They need Klay Thompson to be this version of Klay Thompson, and that's just a scorer giving them 20 points a night and shooting 40% from 3. And we talked a lot in the first segment about switching. And look, this is a Warriors team that has faced every type of defense in hopes to slow these guys down. And I think Klay is as good as anyone at slipping screens, at getting back cuts. Like, he's going to find a way to shoot and score. He has been so good in the biggest moments. And we always talk about Klay's shooting, but we need to talk more about his level of competitiveness, his competitive stamina in the biggest moments. He always shows up.
Well, we know offensively he certainly always shows up, but sometimes he can be underrated defensively, Matt.
My favorite part about this whole season up to this point was actually that Klay returned. I think we can all say, Klay was missed.
Yes.
And we're very happy to have him back. And he was definitely a very underrated defense, although, he made first-team all-defense one time, but he was always the guy. And I see why Steph loves him so much. He was the guy that was always going to go out there and guard Dame, CJ, Kyrie, you name the tough front court or the backcourt matchup, and Klay took on that challenge. So although his scoring is back to what it used to be, I still think he may be a half a step slow, but still a very capable defender, and they're definitely going to need that capability on the defensive end against this Boston Celtics team to try to contain Tatum and Brown.
Yeah, you're right, because being a half step slow is not go get it against this Boston Celtic team. They're too young, they're too athletic, and Klay is going to have to be somewhat of the best version of himself on the defensive side of things. I'm not too much worried about him getting buckets and scoring because as great as a shooter he is and he only needs so much space to get his shot off, he's going to get buckets, right? He's going to have a couple games in this series where he have 20 to 25 points in the game. I don't know if they're going to win, but at the end of the day, I got to be able to see if Klay Thompson could really buckle down and slide those puppies and be able to contain one of the two players that they have on that other side in Jason Tatum or Jaylen Brown.
Well, one of the beautiful things, if you want to see a silver lining in Klay's absence, was the ability for Jordan Poole to step up and blossom, for the ability for Juan Toscano-Anderson to take some of those minutes and work on his own game so that they could build out their depth a little bit, because that was such a key, strength in numbers, right? That was such a key to what the Warriors were able to build in those dynasty years. And we get to see it up close and personal, because next on NBA Today, it's the finals experience you've wanted, and we've got you covered. Today's battle-tested panel on how to focus in high-pressure moments. And let's give flowers to both franchises. Why Boston kept trusting the Jays, and how the Dubs squeezed out yet another title run. Plus, a guy who knows a thing or two or 10 about finals runs. It's LeBron James. Two classics that happened on this day in history. That's just minutes away. Don't go anywhere.
You realize that you're home. Chicago. This is what you do, and all those nerves fade. There's two different types of hunger. The hunger to win it for the first time, joining the company of legends. Then there's the hunger to make it back. Because once you taste it,
It looks so much better in person, too.
you'll do anything to get it again. But no matter where your hunger comes from, you're gonna need it.
Two different types of hunger. Clearly, Magic's got finals experience. The Warriors, 123 games of finals experience. But how about the Celtics? Nada, nunca, zilch. That's the largest gap in the finals experience since the Bulls versus the Jazz, and that was back in 1997. So with all that said, it's safe to say our squad's been there, done that, and all of you have played in the finals. Does experience matter? We talked about it on the show yesterday, but Perk, you're up first. What are the days like leading up to the finals from a player's perspective?
Well, it's hectic, right? You think about everything. You think about celebrating getting to the finals. You don't want to take that for granted. And then you think about the travel. You think about how many family members are going to the game, or are they going on the road? You want to book their travel. You want to get tickets. So my advice is get all that out the way, because you can get caught up in the moment. It's almost like a boxer having a mega fight against like a Floyd Mayweather Jr. Floyd Mayweather has been there time and time again. And so you get a new boxer when he's fighting a new opponent, and all of a sudden they arrive in Las Vegas and they see all the posters and they see all the attention that's coming on them. Sometimes Floyd has already won the fight before he has entered the ring because he's used to that limelight. And so sometimes you can get caught up in the finals. I was on the team that did that with the Oklahoma City Thunder, was just happy to be there and forgot that we was there to play the game of basketball. So my advice to the Celtics, get everything out the way. By the time you get on that plane and you're heading down to San Francisco, you need to be locked in with everything put aside, and you just locked in on the game of basketball.
The moment feels bigger than anything else, and
I imagine
we get to experience the playoffs hopefully every year, and there's attention, and there's press, and there's people asking for tickets, and when you get to the finals, it's unlike anything you've ever experienced. And I played in the Final Four as well. There's really no comparison. It feels like the center of the basketball world is focused on you and your team and the other team. And to Perk's point about experience, look, I went through it as a young player on a young team. We didn't realize that our group would never get back to the finals. And when you think about this Boston Celtics team, with Jaylen Brown being 25, Jason Tatum being 24, like those two main guys, Marcus Smart at 28, like this might be your trip to the finals. You have to take advantage of this. There's no next year.
I think everything both these guys said, but just to top it off, is just controlling your emotions. I mean, whether you've been there or you're heading there for the first time, your emotions are always, up and riding high because, like you just said, it's not guaranteed you get back there. This Golden State team has developed a dynasty. They fell flat on their face for a couple of years, and now they're back. So just kind of understanding they've been there, they've done that, they got plenty of experience, and that's why I'm giving them the edge in this series. And then for Boston, being a first time there, not just being satisfied, like Perk said, for being there, Boston believes they can go out there and win that. So to me, it's just being able to control your emotions and finally get to the tip-off in Game 1.
Putting those blinders up, it seems like, is a key. Obviously, I've never played in an NBA Finals, but I did get to hand a team the trophy. And for that entire day, I was so nervous. I didn't do any other television besides the game. And that was just the broadcast. That's not even talking about actually playing in the game.
Yeah.
So I can't imagine the level of focus and a level of tuning things out that you would need to do in order to compete, let alone win in the finals, Perk. It's a lot.
And think about this, though, Malika. Think about this for a second. That's why I always preach to people about, hey, you know what? We can't take for granted the greats that just made it to the finals.
Yep.
Like, even not to just keep harping on LeBron, but think about it. LeBron spent more than half of his career in the NBA Finals. Some guys never reached the NBA Finals. I call it the promised land. Like, getting to there is a goal in itself, and it shouldn't be taken for granted.
Well, let's go to the site of the promised land for Game 1, bringing in the reporter angle. Kendra Andrews covering the Warriors, Tim Bontemps covering the Celtics. So, Kendra, I want to start with you here. What's the latest you're hearing? Let's start with health on the status of both Otto Porter and Gary Payton II.
Well, Malika, Otto Porter Jr. and Gary Payton practiced with the team yesterday, but they weren't able to participate in the scrimmage. Steve Kerr said that yesterday was the big scrimmage day, but they weren't able to do that. The plan is for them to practice today and tomorrow with the team, and the hope is that those practices are going to give the team some more insight onto what their availability will look like heading into Thursday's Game 1.
You also spoke with head coach Steve Kerr yesterday. Did he reveal any major strategies or game plans, things that would be important for our viewers at home to know?
Yeah, Steve Kerr said that Andrew Wiggins, just as he's been taking on their opponent's best player all postseason long, he's going to be the main defender on Jason Tatum. And Andrew Wiggins says, I love that kind of challenge. He takes immense pride in his defense. He played it against John Morant in the Western Conference semis. He played it against Luka Doncic in the conference finals. Now he's getting ready for Jason Tatum. But of course, it's going to be a team effort. No one guy can be tasked with completely containing a player like Tatum.
No one player can, but it's going to start with Andrew Wiggins. Interesting. All right, let's move to the Boston side of things. Tim, what are you hearing about the health of Robert Williams and then Marcus Smart as well?
Well, Ime Udoka this morning, Malika talked to the media, and his message to everyone was, this team is finally going to get a chance to take a break, and that's going to be a huge thing for both of those guys. You go back to Game 3 of the second-round series against the Bucks. The Celtics played every other day from that point through Game 7 of the conference finals against the Heat. That's 12 games over a 23-day span. That's a crazy workload for these guys to go through, and that's especially when you're dealing with Robert Williams with this knee soreness and Marcus Smart with a sore right quad, a sore right ankle, and a sore right foot. But both those guys are feeling better with this time off, and Ime Udoka's confident they're both going to be good to go when this series starts. And to play off your conversation before, Malika, the other thing I thought that was interesting that Ime said this morning was that the Celtics aren't here to raise an Eastern Conference Finals banner. They're trying to get banner 18. They seem locked in and focused on this series. And while they don't have any finals experience among these players, they have a ton of guys who've been deep in the playoffs. And Ime thinks these guys are going to be ready to go as a result of that, because this is not their first rodeo going deep into the playoffs if it is their first time in the finals.
Absolutely. Tim, unrelated to Boston, I do want to stay in the East, though. Some news coming out of Philadelphia. What can you tell us about MVP runner-up Joel Embiid?
Well, Malika, Joel Embiid had surgery as expected on his right thumb, the thumb he injured in that first round series against the Toronto Raptors yesterday. He also had surgery, or procedure, I should say, on his left index finger, which was a bit of a surprise. Was not expecting to see that. But he is, as of now, and it seems like he's not going to have surgery on that orbital bone fracture in his face, which was the plan going in to the offseason. He was going to get surgery on his thumb. He didn't think he'd have to have surgery on his face. And he is lined up the second time in a row MVP finalist to be ready for training camp in the fall with all systems go. But certainly after the way Joel went through the playoffs, it was not a surprise at least that he had to get that thumb fixed after hurting it in that Raptors series.
Well, Joel Embiid is on the mend. Tim, Kendra, thank you so much. We will see you both in the Bay Area. The NBA Finals, they start Thursday night at 9 Eastern, 6 Pacific.
Headed to the NBA Finals. The embers of the dynasty still glowing.
This one is special. This is a group that no one thought would ever be back here. And we here. We back.
We know this isn't the ultimate goal.
We still got 4 more to go, Dog Nation.
They're back. Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, and Draymond Green. They're entering their 6th NBA Finals together. They're the first trio with at least one All-Star selection each, and they're the first to do that in the last 50 seasons. But remember, it was just 2 years ago that the Warriors, they were struggling. In fact, they finished with a 15-50 record in 2020. That's the worst record in the NBA. Kevin Durant, he had left for the Nets. Steph Curry played just 5 games. Klay Thompson missed the entire season. And the future, it looked bleak. But all is well in the Bay again. The Warriors, they seek another championship, this time in San Francisco, not in Oracle. But Golden State became just the 4th team in NBA history to go from the worst record in the league to the NBA Finals in a span of just 3 seasons. And they'll try to become the first to win a championship. And for more, here's Ramona Shelburne.
Kevin Durant is going to sign with the Nets 4 years, $164 million.
I think the Warriors internally, they're too proud to say it out loud, but they're going to look at it as a gap year.
Golden State Warriors general manager Bob Myers has forgotten a lot of what transpired in the first few hours after Kevin Durant officially told him he was leaving the summer of 2019. It was, as you can imagine, a rather low moment. The Warriors' run of 5 straight finals appearances had ended with the loss of the Toronto Raptors, following devastating injuries to Durant and Klay Thompson.
Thompson grabs his left knee.
The dynasty, which once seemed so impenetrable, now felt like it was collapsing on itself. Durant was leaving, the remaining roster was creaky and expensive, and he had little to no options to fix things. But Myers had an idea. If he could convince Durant to do a sign-and-trade, the Warriors could reload by acquiring free agent guard D'Angelo Russell. Maybe not an ideal fit for the Warriors' style of play, but it was better to get someone back to replace Durant than lose him for nothing. There was one problem with this plan, though. Durant had absolutely no incentive to help the team he was leaving. If anything, it was hard for a player of his caliber to swallow the idea of being traded. Myers had just one card to play. The personal one. The superstar and the GM had grown close over the 3 years Durant played with the Warriors. What happened next set the Warriors on a path back to the NBA Finals. Durant agreed to the sign-and-trade. The Warriors threw in a heavily protected future pick to make it worth the Nets' trouble. And a year later, Russell was traded to Minnesota for Andrew Wiggins and a future first-round pick that became Jonathan Kuminga. This year, Wiggins became an all-star and a key contributor to Golden State on each side of the ball.
Flushes with a big right hand.
Kuminga established himself as a superstar. The Warriors are not the first franchise to stare into the abyss after a superstar player leaves in free agency and wonder how they'll ever climb out of the crater. Most take decades to recover from such departures. Their runs fade into NBA history, becoming just the latest reminder of how rare it is to build a historic dynasty, like the Boston Celtics of the 60s and 70s.
Once again, the world champions.
Lakers of the 80s and 2000s.
Bryant to shot.
And Chicago Bulls of the 90s.
Jordan open. Chicago with the lead.
It can extend beyond that first rise and fall.
Their 6th NBA championship.
It remains to be seen which historical category these Warriors fall into. But in returning to the finals after just a 2-year rebuild, they've already done what few expected back when Durant left in 2019.
Curry steps to his left, takes the 3, got it!
The Warriors are back, and just 4 wins away from history.
Continuation of the golden era.
Ramona Bods, thank you. That was excellent. All right, let's take the long lens view here, though. The Warriors and Celtics, they drafted their top 3 scorers this postseason. The Jays and Marcus Smart for Boston, Steph, Klay, Jordan Poole for the Warriors. It's the first time since 1998 that the top 3 postseason scorers on each finals team made their debut with their respective team. So for more on how the Celtics roster has been constructed, the other side of things, we're joined by front office insider Bobby Marks. And Bobby, I hate to do this to you, but I'm going to make you relive a trade that has gone down in infamy. It was draft night 2013. You were there. A massive trade between the Celtics and the Nets. We've heard about it for years. I'm not going to go through all the details. Let's just take a look at some notable parts of it. Paul Pierce, KG to Brooklyn. Whole lot of players. Picks that became Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, back to Boston. Could you have ever imagined that trade could be the centerpiece for a Celtics finals run?
Malika, I thought we were friends. I thought we wouldn't be talking about this. Could I ever imagine? No. Could I have imagined it turned into, Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown? And I think if it wasn't Boston, those picks were going somewhere. I think we were so aggressive as a front office back then that some other team would have probably gotten multiple unprotected first-round picks here. And I think the one thing to look at is at the time of the trade, Tatum was 15 and Brown was 17. I think I'd have a lot more guilt if we were staring at Jason Tatum the night of the draft and then traded that pick away to the Celtics here. But those two have turned into, certainly two special players. And the one thing, Malika, I have two boys at home. You know what the nickname of the school they go to is? The Celtics. I can't get rid of the Celtics in this house.
You can't escape them, and I am your friend, Bobby. I am, but this is what true friends do. They give each other a hard time. But I'll lay off. Fast forward to this season. There was a changing of the guard in Boston, right? Danny Ainge out, Brad Stevens to the front office, Ime Udoka and his new head coach. The Celtics struggling early. Fans, analysts, our own included, questioning the fit and breaking up of the Jays. Was that ever actually a consideration in Boston?
No, it wasn't. I think this year was more about an evaluation period for Brad Stevens in the front office and Ime Udoka as the head coach here. And the goal was to get through this season and then evaluate. I don't think anybody would realize that this team would still be playing in the NBA Finals right now. And when you have two players under the age of 25 that are wings, premium in the league here, you're not breaking up those two players here. So get through the season, evaluate where you are, and then maybe make a roster decision this offseason. And Boston's got two good ones in Brown and Tatum.
Absolutely. Bobby Marks, thank you so much for spending time with us, my friend. Emphasis on friend. I cannot wait for the Bobby Marks stories that are going to come out around the trade, around free agency. It's going to be so much fun. Some other news, though, Bobby, from the NBA. The Cleveland Cavaliers, they are hiring Luke Walton as an assistant coach. That's according to ESPN senior insider Adrian Wojnarowski. Walton joins Coach J.B. Bickerstaff's staff. Say that 10 times fast. After spending the past 5+ seasons as head coach of the Los Angeles Lakers and Sacramento Kings, Walton, who was dismissed after a 6-11 start with the Kings in November, was part of an NBA championship coaching staff with Golden State under Steve Kerr in 2015. We're not done here on NBA Today, though. When we return, stop me if you've heard this one before. Kevin Durant said what on Twitter?